In today's video, we're going to be looking at the XFusion AI by Mr. and Mrs. Chen here, who seems to have developed a pretty interesting looking currency bot. So I've ran a few back tests. I'm now excited to dive into the sales page to see how this bot actually works. So once again, like many MQL5 bots, they claim to be using a lot of AI, but behind that, I do think there actually is a real strategy here. And that's backed up by both looking at the signal, seeing that there's clearly something going on, as well as you can just generally see from even the sales text that most likely there is something kind of underlying the performance here. So this is very much a currency-based bot. I never read too much into the AI side of things because, frankly, even if there is AI in a bot, usually it just enhances an existing strategy. So when evaluating if a bot works or not, you want to see what the core, like technical, systematic strategy behind it is, and then if there's AI on top of it, how it's like further enhancing it. So here we can see that it's running on GBP USD and Euro USD on the M15 time frame, and there's actually two different strategies behind it. And just by some of the language here, it looks that he understands that there is both trend following and momentum style strategies, some which are also based on more pullbacks. So I would venture that one of these strategies is probably more breakout based, while the other one might be more like a mean reversion style system. So really he's stacking a few different systems, or she's stacking a few different systems together. And effectively in doing so, you likely have a bit more diversification. There's also apparently some different filters like volatility filters, high-low filters, and there's a few different risk management features here as well. So I believe it does use some sort of grid system to enter, and it's actually pretty obvious that it does. Like if you look at this, it's obviously a grid, right? However, I don't think it's a particularly aggressive grid, at least with the settings that I ran. It does not seem to be using any sort of like massive lot scaling, which is usually a pretty good sign. And he's also saying that he's significantly robustness tested this bot with 10 years of high quality tick data. And so far it looks actually pretty interesting, because when we see from this equity curve here too, it doesn't look like a beautiful, just perfect straight line up. So it looks to be like there is some nice little kind of dips in the equity curve, while obviously being incredibly good performance, which is usually better than seeing a perfect straight line up. Because if you see a perfect straight line up, generally there's some sort of manipulation happening, because unfortunately none of us have yet to invent the magic money printer, which can just like print cash nonstop while you sleep. So now we can go to the actual signal page, and we can see that it's looking pretty solid. He is indeed running this on GBP USD. There is clearly a grid going on here too, because we can see that multiple different positions are ending in at the same time. So that would usually be an indication of a grid, and they're also in the same direction, but it's going long and short. He's ran it for just around 1 month by now. Actually, it's not even quite a month. It's a bit less than a month. And so far he's made 11%. And this appears to be with relatively conservative settings. He's using it on a real broker, so IZ Markets, with actually a reasonably meaningful amount of money, with $2,000. So like it's not a de minimis amount of cash. So he seems to actually believe in it. And yeah, like so far it's looking, it's definitely a grid bot, but there's something clearly here. And the reviews have been pretty solid so far too. People seem rather happy with it, and it appears to be flying off the shelves. So I ran a back test of it here on MT5, and he recommended to run it on the M15. And like very clearly it's a grid, right? Like there's no hiding gridness here. Like clearly it's opening many positions and they're closing in the same spot. I would venture one of the strategies is more of a pullback with the trend, while the other is more like pure mean reversion. Like for instance, this is more like, hey, the prevailing trend is up, there's a bit of a pullback, and then we buy. Most likely there's some sort of oscillator. Like this kind of entry signal is very clearly to me looking like you dip below a Bollinger Band and then you re-enter. Or you have an RSI which kind of exit the overbought region or the oversold region and starts to dip back in, and then you enter. Like it's a very classic style of bot building. Almost all of us have developed systems like this when we first got into making bots, just because it's relatively straightforward to code them. And here we can see a big grid where you had like many grids overlapping. And all of that looks to be pretty straightforward. In terms of the inputs, when I see a grid system, I'm always looking for any sort of like max drawdown. And here he has a couple equity stop losses, which is the exact correct way to use a grid. So like realistically, if you have an equity stop loss versus a fixed stop loss, you still have safety protection. Right now, this is pretty aggressive at 80%, but I'm sure you can reduce that to fit your own liking. And if we look at the actual graph, he did hit the equity stop loss a few times. I don't believe that this is a withdrawal. I believe it's actually like a real equity stop loss, but nothing too out of the ordinary there. But overall, like, it looks like a fairly well thought out and well designed grid system. If we look at the actual like volume of the backtest when running it too, we're not seeing any sort of crazy aggressive scaling. It's simply going up as the balance goes up. So it's also a very good sign. So honestly, this looks like this particular set file is probably a bit too aggressive. Like, this is almost a 400% return, and we do hit the equity stop loss a few times, which leads us to a 20% max drawdown. Aggressive for my taste, but for a lot of people this would be totally fine. It depends on how much capital you want to put into it, and if you're doing it with a small account, perhaps you want to be a bit more aggressive. So honestly, for a grid system, this looks pretty solid and it looks pretty interesting. So I'm curious to see how it performs live for a few more months, but considering if you like this style of bot, it could be a pretty interesting option because there doesn't appear to be too many smoke and mirrors behind it. In terms of the AI side of things, I'm not seeing any place to actually load it, but that's fine. It's kind of almost become a prerequisite on the MQL5 marketplace that you have to mention AI and make a few flashy graphics. Like here it says AI online, which in my opinion is obviously fake because you can't run web requests in a backtest. So yeah, that's probably the one knock against it. The kind of the obscuration of the use of AI is not great because it just shows a bit of a lack of transparency. However, the rest of it seems to be like a pretty real system. So overall, interesting addition to the MQL5 marketplace. I'd be curious to see how it looks in a couple of months, but there's definitely a real strategy behind it. So guys, hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you in the next one.